Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to start off again with the English 101. And what I'll be doing is just again, I'll be going ahead and just making sure that all of this is, we go through everything again. By now, you should have already completed the getting started. When you should have your textbook open for the English class to help you out. The other thing is, again, I'm just going to recap the review exercise just so it's recorded here. But for the review exercise, again, there are 10 questions, 2 attempts, and there's no time limit. And these are just questions that work like this again. It's just, you're going to, for this week, you're just looking for the word that fits best, just like this in the tense, right? So Harriet blank a blanket across the sleeping child. Did Harriet laid, Harriet lied, or Harriet laid, right? It's the first one. So as we're going with these again, you would just do the same thing. Who drinked, who drank, who drunk, who drinked. And it'll be drank, right? So you're going to do this for all 10. And once you're done with that, again, this is due Sunday. And again, you have 2 attempts and there's 10 questions, but it is due Sunday. So anytime you have those review exercises just like this here, you'll see that they're due Sunday. So you can always save those for later, just because, again, they don't really take up that much time. In all honesty, the review exercise, you can probably allocate about no more than 30 minutes and you should be fine. Because even if you can't figure it out, because these review exercises aren't really proctored tests, you could use the book, you can use the internet to help you out with any of these in case you do need assistance. Now, let's get into your discussion again. So let's open up the week 1 discussion here. So here in this week 1 discussion, we're looking at introduction to the writing process and strategies to improve reading skills. And as it states here, your text suggests 4 steps to the exploring stage of the writing process. Well, you might be wondering what 4 steps are they, or what's the text? When it says your text, it means your textbook. And when it's talking about these 4 steps of the exploring stage, this is what we need to do. We need to pick one of the 4 steps and explain them in our own words, our understanding of each of these steps. Then we're going to provide examples. So let's go here. Let's open up our textbook. These exploring stages are going to be at the beginning. So if you look at part 1, the writing process here, and let's actually close this portion. You can go ahead and read the brief overview if needed. But if we go on to, let's look at, let's see here. Actually, let's go to the next page. And I believe here, let's take a look. So generally at the beginning of your book, this is where you'll come across the exploring part. So again, in page 3 right here, as you can see, the page numbers are down here on the bottom right of your textbooks anytime you're looking at those. So here at page 3, where you start looking at this exploring area. Now here again, these are the learning objectives, but let's actually look for those 4 steps that were being asked of us. So now here at the bottom of page 4, it says step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4 of the exploring part, right? So when we're looking at this, the first step here, again, is thinking about your topic. This is where you determine what you'll be writing about. When you're looking at step 2, this is more thinking about your audience, considering who your intended readers are and what interests them. And then we have step 3, we're thinking about your purpose, asking yourself why you want to write. And then finally, step 4 is exploring strategies. And there's going to be a few within these that you can also write about each one. And then you're going to experiment with 4 different ways to generate ideas. So again, it's asking us here, looking, so there's 4 steps to the exploring stage of the writing process. So we're going to pick one and explain it in our own words. So from here, you can choose one of these options. Let's take a look here. So we can either choose to talk about a topic, we can choose to talk about an audience, we can choose to talk about purpose. And within the exploring strategies, we can actually choose to talk about any one of these to meet the criteria. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, what is the topic? I want to know more. Well, if you go on to the next page here, you can see that it says that each of these pages, as you proceed, will cover one of these little exploring strategies or these exploring stages. So the first one is identifying your topic, right? So like here, it tells you what it is. Your topic or subject is what you are writing about. When an instructor gives a topic, for your writing, narrow the topic and find an angle that interests you. For example, and this is the example portion. So you see already in that first sentence, there was a definition, right? So you would do something similar where you're going to provide a definition in your own words. Again, you can rephrase this as long as you can show your understanding. And then you provide an example, just like this here. For example, if your instructor asks you to write about travel, you can take many approaches to the topic. You might write about the dangers of travel or explain what people can learn when they travel. Try to narrow the topic to suit your interests, which is always good. Let's see here. So when thinking about your topic, ask yourself the following questions. What special knowledge do you have about the topic? What subtopics are most relevant to me? What aspects of the topic arouse my emotions? They're just, again, all things. Now, in reality, the simplest way to look at look at this first part is just look at the key things here again. You don't have to like get too hung on all this stuff here, all these little nuance, but you can just say, okay, well, I just want to write about audience and explain it in my own words because I know what an audience is, right? When I'm watching TV shows, listening to music, there's always an audience for all of these topics. So all you're doing is taking one of those, and again, you're going to explain it in your own words what it is. So like we were just looking at, the topic is a core subject matter that we're trying to write about or we're trying to talk about in a paper or in any other medium. And that's how you talk about your understanding of what it is. And you're going to provide an example. And you're already seen them. Now I can say an example is when I'm looking to do a presentation, I have to come up with a topic that I can, focus on, right? Because you don't want to just do a presentation on every single thing. You want to focus on a topic. So for example, if we're talking about cars, well, maybe your topic is a little more narrowed. You want to talk about electric cars. And then within that topic, you can see, again, then that goes a little deeper if you want to keep adding more, like your audience and everything else. But your topic is just what everything is revolving around. So again, if you're doing a paper, that core paper you're doing is all revolving around one central topic. Your presentation's revolving around one central topic. So that's the best way you can kind of put it in your own words and also provide an example just as so. The second part here is asking, how can understanding the writing process help you improve your reading skills? Well, again, where you can take a look at each of these things here, especially the exploring strategies. Now, in reality, when you're looking at the writing process to do anything, just when you're reading, you can already pick up a book, you can pick up a magazine, any sort of material, and see if you're the right audience for it, right? And how do you do that? You look at the topic of a book, or a magazine, right? If you go to like a bookstore like Barnes and Noble or something, and you already know what you're looking for, but as you're reading it too, there's a few things that you'll be able to pick up. You can see, okay, well, not only am I the audience for it, but did this person put a lot of thought into their research? Like, how well is it structured? Because if a piece of writing is structured well, for the most part, you'll be able to understand it as a reader too. Because again, if somebody writes something that's just all over the place, then you as a reader may not be able to understand. This is why we have standards and rules in writing. For example, all of you will be doing APA, which is a structured format for writing. And we do this so then everybody has a cohesive way to read something. Just like if you read a journal article or a magazine or something, or a periodical, they generally also follow a certain set of criteria, right? Because everything has usually like a nice hook at the beginning, and then they go into maybe a little thesis statement, and then they finally have a body and then a conclusion. That's how almost everything reads and writes, right? But you'll see that in the writing process. And again, this helps you improve your reading skills because you can start catching those and saying, okay, as I'm reading, this right here is the core thesis. This is right here is where the bulk of the information is. This is more filler. This is just background. And you'll be able to improve your reading skills exponentially by being able to figure out how the writing process is used in all these forms of writing. Now, like it stays here, your initial post should be at least 200 words in length, and you should respond to at least 2 peers with a minimum word count of 150 words. So again, the word count for this one is at least 200 words for the initial post. The initial post is due today, Wednesday, April 19th. So before midnight tonight, you would have to complete at least the initial part. And then you can, by Friday before midnight, you would go ahead and do the 2 peer responses. And you can see here your instructor has done a great job of already kind of going over her own examples of these. And you can read that once you've posted your stuff. Now, just a quick thing, if for whatever reason you need to edit your post, just because maybe you catch some typos or something, on the top right here, you'll see that there's these 3 dots. You can go ahead and click that and you can hit edit and you'll be able to edit your post. So if you catch some typos or anything, that's the best way to do it. Another thing, like we discussed in orientation, I would strongly recommend that you get this Grammarly extension for Chrome, because the instant you start writing, for example, if I hit reply, and this is how you would respond to the post. So again, let me show you how to get here again. Is at the top of your post, right here where it says reply under the main post, this is where you would actually put your initial post. So now I can start typing. So the moment it's like, this is the story of me, for example, right? Grammarly will be able to highlight things and tell you, okay, change this to my story. I can go ahead and click that. And depending on what you're doing, it will catch some of these, like here, punctuation. I would go ahead and, not punctuation, but right here, my grammar, right? So that's the cool thing about using Grammarly. You can see here that it thinks. The moment you start writing, it starts to think, and then you'll be able to see, okay, well, maybe I need to make some changes. So again, strongly recommend, incredible tool, helps you out. And again, when you're writing, you can always include things. So here, for example, and we'll see this later when we're going over the math portion, but if I wanted to include a picture, I can go ahead and click insert. I can link an image, upload an image. I can link media, anything else that I want. And of course, this equation part, which will come in handy. But when you're writing, try to keep everything consistent. Don't use any fonts that are going to be hard to read or anything else too, and anything like that. But again, that's just how you can get started. Now, when you're responding to a peer, my recommendation is look at somebody's post that you can relate to, right? Like here, for example, the student has already posted and they're talking about the pre-writing and the writing process. And this is, again, a cool little tool. If I wanted to respond to the student, I can go ahead and click on the reply option here. And again, it'll bring me this text block, and this is how I can provide my response. As soon as you start writing, you'll see that it tells you the word count there. So again, 150 words for your peer responses, 200 words for your initial post. Now, again, this one is due by tonight before midnight. Your second discussion post, this is also due by tonight before midnight. So this one here is revolving around review of sentences discussions. So here, step 1 is to please respond to one of the reflect on it questions. And these are the questions that are listed below. Step 2 is asking, in your responses to your peers, compare your responses to your classmates. So you're going to compare whatever responses that you made or whatever answers that you have, and you're going to compare those to somebody else that has the same one as you. It's a pretty straightforward thing. And then the next part to this is, what is the best way to remember or recognize sentence issues when writing? And we'll get into that as we start looking at these questions. And then finally, the third step is respond to one of the sets of reflect on it questions not covered in the initial post. So the goal is to ensure that all concepts are covered clearly so that you can effectively identify sentence issues in your own writing. All this is saying is this, and again, I'll do my best to kind of reiterate it in a much more simpler way. But the first thing you need to do is look at these sets. This is a one set, simple sentences. Compound sentences is another set. Sentence variety is one set. Fragments is another, and you get it, right? You only do one set. You don't have to do every single one. Don't answer every single set. You're just going to choose one to start off with, and then you're going to look for one that hasn't been done in the initial post and do that. for my experience of seeing this, most people will either do the first one or they'll do the smaller ones. So you can always just browse around and see, okay, what are people doing and what are people writing on? Like here, the student chose fragment sentences, right? So they went ahead and answered fragments, and they answered all of these. So if we look here at some of these students that have already done these, right? We can see that they are answering the questions in a cohesive paragraph, and that's a good way to do it. You can either do it that way, or you can also write your answer right next to each of these questions. Preferably, we would like it all to be a cohesive paragraph when you're answering these, right? So you, like, for example, if I'm doing what is a sentence? So I can look in my book here, and I can use my magnifying glass and type in sentence. So as I type this in, you can see there's already identifying the topic, sentence, topic, sentence, topic, sentence. Well, let's look at the beginning one here. This is like our initial thing, right? So as I click onto this, we can look at our topic sentences and see what they are. Now, like I said before, if you're like, well, I still don't get exactly what a sentence is. Well, this is where our friend Google comes in. We can type in what is a sentence, right? Now here, we can look at let's look at this one here, right? And some of these provide some pretty good information. So what is a sentence? So the sentence usually has a subject and a predicate. So like here, in simple terms, a sentence is a set of words that contain a subject, what the sentence is about, or the topic of the sentence, and a predicate. And the predicate is what is said about the subject. So here we can see the subject is this, right? Because it's something, this, that, who, any of those things is a subject. And the predicate here, again, is what's being said about the subject. So this is a sentence. So this object here, this is the sentence. And again, here are your examples again. We have the subject, which is you, and then we have the predicate, which is speak English. And again, we know speak is a verb because it's like an action, right? So we can break these down. Now, this is like a pretty good example. And if needed, again, this is why I like that these days you have so many resources. Again, the book is good and it gives you a lot of great information, but sometimes it's easy to get a little lost within the textbook because there are so many chapters. So just like I did, you can look up some of these things and look at examples that are here, right? So when you're looking at how to explain it, now that you know, don't copy just this here. Like, don't just say like copy this and paste it there, because again, then that is known as plagiarism. What you want to do is, like, now that you know, is rewrite this in your own words as best you can. And you're going to do the same for all of these. Like, what does the subject of a sentence do? What is a verb, etc., right? So again, it doesn't matter which one of these sets you choose, but you're going to choose one. Choose one that you probably are familiar with. And if not, you can challenge yourself too and do a set that maybe you don't know and you want to be more familiar with, like fragments, for example. If you don't know what fragments are, then figure that out. And you can find those by, again, using your book and using that. The easiest way I can explain this discussion, honestly, is do one, kind of take a quick look to see what somebody else has done. Most people are going to choose the same. And then just do one that hasn't been done. So if you chose simple sentences and you see that nobody has done anything on compound sentences, then just do that one. Or as long as you're not doing the same one. But the whole point of this is to see that you are understanding these foundations of writing and what sentence structures are and all of these items here. And then just remember to also include a post saying, what is the best way to remember or recognize sentence issues when writing? For me personally, one of the best ways to do this is to read out loud, and maybe even noting on the side some like your ideas and remember. So when you're proofreading or editing your own papers, you can use like a red marker or something to point out your structural issues. You can read out loud. There's so many ways you can look at your sentence, because if you're looking at a sentence and you're like, there is like, for example, you can find run-on sentences by reading out loud and it doesn't stop, right? There's no pause. You're like, this is this is this is this is that. But then you're like, well, that actually sounds like there's no break. It just sounds too much information. I need up to pause somewhere. Well, then that's, again, one way you can start seeing or recognizing sentence issues. And you can start seeing when you're reading too, it's like, this is too short, this is way too long, and it's missing certain things too. So again, but you'll start getting to know or getting yourself more familiar with this as you start looking at what these are and getting yourself familiar with like parallel structures, compound sentences, sentence variety, and the sort. But that essentially is what you have to do this week. So you do these 2 discussions for your English class. These 2 are due by tonight, again, before midnight. And again, for both of those, you should have at least 200 words for the initial post. But for honestly, for the second one here, the whole reviewing, this one will probably take you more than the 200 words, which is fine. So don't worry about that one. But always when you're looking at your discussions, unless noted otherwise, your initial post will always be about 200 words at a minimum. And then your peer responses are going to be about 150 words minimum too, but double check in the case that it says something else. And then you have your review exercise that is due Sunday. So again, these 2 by initial post by Wednesday before midnight. Your peer responses, at least 2 of them by Friday before midnight as well. And then you can do that. Let's see here. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Now let's move on to the math.